In the late 13th century, Osman I established a small beylik, or principality, in what is now Turkey. In just a few generations, this beylik outmaneuvered more powerful neighbors to become the vast Ottoman Empire. What enabled its rapid rise? In Osman's time, the Anatolian Peninsula was a patchwork of Turkic principalities, sandwiched between a crumbling Byzantine Empire and weakened Sultanate of the Seljuk of Rum. Osman quickly expanded this territory through a mixture of strategic political alliances and military conflicts with these neighbors, attracting mercenaries first with the promise of booty, then later through his reputation for winning. Osman was the first in a line of Ottoman rulers distinguished by their political shrewdness, often prioritizing political and military utility over ethnic or religious affinity. They expanded their influence by fighting along certain sides when needed and fighting against them when the time was right. After Osman's death, his son Orhan established a sophisticated military organization and tax collection system geared towards funding quick territorial expansion. The Ottomans' first major expansion was in the Balkans, in Southeast Europe. The military employed a mixture of Turkic warriors and Byzantine and other Balkan Christian converts. They captured thousands of young Christian boys from villages from across the Balkans, converted them to Islam, and trained them to become the backbone of a fierce military elite force known as the Janissaries. The captured enslaved boys could rise to the high position of vizier in the Ottoman government. Rulers of conquered areas were also allowed, even encouraged, to convert to Islam and take positions in the Ottoman government. Meanwhile, non-Muslims who belonged to Abrahamic religions were allowed religious freedom in exchange for a tax known as jizya, among other strict conditions. For example, they were not allowed to join the army. By the end of the 14th century, the Ottomans had conquered or subordinated most of the Anatolian beyliks, as well as the Balkans. But in the first half of the 15th century, as Sultan Bayezid I focused on Western expansion, the Central Asian ruler Timur attacked from the east. He captured Bayezid and carted him off in an iron cage, sparking a 10-year struggle for succession that almost destroyed the Ottoman Empire. Sultan Murad II turned this trend around, but fell short of one of his loftiest goals, capturing the Byzantine capital, Constantinople. His son, Sultan Mehmed II, or Mehmed the Conqueror, vowed to succeed where his father had failed. In preparation for the attack on Constantinople, he hired a Hungarian engineer to forge the largest cannon in the world, used Serbian miners to dig tunnels under the walls of the city, and ordered his fleet of ships to be carried overland, attacking the city from an unexpected direction. He laid siege to the city, and in the spring of 1453, Constantinople fell to the Ottomans. It would become the Ottoman capital, known by its common Greek name, Istanbul, meaning to the city. By the time Mehmed II conquered Constantinople, the city was a shadow of its former glory. Under Ottoman rule, it flourished once again. On an average day in Istanbul, you could hear people speaking Greek, Turkish, Armenian, Persian, Arabic, Bulgarian, Albanian, and Serbian. Architects like the famous Sinan filled the city with splendid mosques and other buildings commissioned by the sultans. Through Istanbul, the Ottomans brought commodities like coffee to Europe. They entered a golden age of economic growth, territorial acquisition, art and architecture. They brought together craftspeople from across Europe, Africa, the Middle East, and Central Asia to create a unique blend of cultural innovation. Iznik ceramics, for example, were made using techniques from China's Ming dynasty, reimagined with Ottoman motifs. The Ottomans would continue to expand, cementing their political influence and lucrative trade routes. The empire lasted for more than 600 years and, at its peak, stretched from Hungary to the Persian Gulf, from the Horn of Africa to the Crimean Peninsula. One of the capital city's great buildings was Hagia Sophia. A lightning rod for controversy, Hagia Sophia has been a church, a mosque, a museum, and is still used as a political chess piece to this day. Learn more about this ancient edifice with this video.
While Istanbul slept in the early hours of April 27, 1909, Sultan Abdülhamit II boarded a westbound train. Under cover of darkness, he left the imperial capital, bringing an end to his reign. For almost 6 centuries, his family had ruled the Ottoman Empire, spanning regions in North Africa, Southeastern Europe, and the Middle East. But the end of this powerful dynasty had been brewing for years. In the late 18th century, the Ottomans' once feared faction of elite warriors, called the Janissaries, had become inefficient and greedy. Their numbers swelled with poorly trained fighters, and their outdated weapons led to a series of embarrassing defeats that coincided with several economic crises. To survive, Sultan Selim III sought to curb the Janissaries' influence and modernize the empire with widespread reforms. The warriors rebelled and assassinated Selim, but his successor would not be so easily beaten. Mahmud II subdued their revolt in a massacre known as the Auspicious Event, and swiftly replaced the outmoded warriors with a European-style army. This was one of many far-reaching efforts to modernize the empire, which were continued by Mahmud's successor. Sultan Abdülmecid ushered in an era of reforms known as the Tanzimat, or reordering, where economic and administrative systems were overhauled, and subjects from all backgrounds were recruited to work for the government. The Tanzimat was hindered by foreign debt and political upheavals. But perhaps the era's biggest challenge was the dynasty's initiative to unite their diverse subjects. The Ottoman Empire spanned 3 continents, containing numerous religious and ethnic groups, including Arabs, Turks, Kurds, Greeks, Armenians, Jews, and more. These minority groups were free to choose their language, religion, and cultural practices, yet most of them were deprived the full rights of Muslim citizens. They had to pay extra taxes and were prevented from participating in serving in the military. By the mid-19th century, this divide was met with pressure from inside and outside the empire for reform. So, Ottoman leaders tried to resolve it by introducing an all-inclusive Ottoman national identity. This reform signaled a drastic societal shift and emphasized legal equality for all subjects, alongside new laws concerning citizenship, property, and taxation. The newly accorded privileges and reforms were sometimes met with resistance by some members of the ruling classes. Many minority groups formed separatist movements, and European empires, including Russia, France, and Britain, further undermined attempts at unity by fueling ethno-nationalist sentiments. This discord contributed to the empire losing territories in North Africa and the Balkans, where large-scale ethnic cleansing of local Muslims often followed, and efforts to promote pan-Ottoman identity in the remaining provinces were met with lukewarm success, especially after Sultan Abdülhamit II took the throne. While Abdülhamit shared his predecessor's interest in modernizing reforms, extensive building projects, and expanding education, he also ruled as an absolute monarch. During his reign, he suspended the constitution and supported widespread censorship. Political oppression and violence became regular tools of the state, including anti-Armenian massacres in Anatolia that came to be known as the Hamidian massacres. In 1908, a coup by army officers known as the Young Turk Revolution curtailed his power and restored the constitution. But while his successor Mehmed V took the throne, the Young Turks' political party took hold of the power. The Committee for Union and Progress encouraged democratic reforms. However, they also pushed for a new brand of Ottoman nationalism centered on Turkish identity. This change further alienated non-Turkish Ottomans, adding fuel to numerous opposition movements. Yet just as this political infighting was heating up, European powers initiated an even larger conflict. At the dawn of World War I, the CUP-controlled government sided with their longtime allies in Germany. But following early victories, the war turned disastrous. The Ottomans suffered severe losses and the highest number of deaths per capita in any warring nation. All the while, Brits and Russians were supporting the empire's anti-Ottoman movements, including several Armenian organizations. In 1915, the CUP responded by issuing the Temporary Law of Deportation, effectively authorizing the ethnic cleansing of the Armenian population. This policy was carried out with such brutality that an estimated 1 million Armenians perished in what is now known as the Armenian Genocide. By the end of 1918, World War I was over. The Ottoman side had lost, and the victors began hastily carving up what remained of the empire into new nation-states that suited their interests. The British promised some ruling families what would become Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Jordan. The remaining Arab-majority territories were split into Syria, Lebanon, and Palestine, all of which were divided between the French and British. The Allies had further plans for Istanbul and Anatolia, but the Turkish War of Independence forced a renegotiation. Eventually, this led to the creation of the Independent Republic of Turkey in 1923 and the formal end to over 6 centuries of Ottoman rule. If you enjoy learning about history, subscribe to this channel, because the lessons of yesterday can help us face the challenges of today.
The Kurdish people are one of the world's largest ethnic groups without a country of their own. This has made them vulnerable to persecution, mass displacement, and ethnic cleansing. Though they practice a handful of religions, the majority are Sunni Muslims. Their ethnic origins are thought to be Indo-European and Persian, not Arab. After World War I, the Allied powers carved up the former Ottoman Empire and promised the Kurds a state. That never happened. The Kurds are displaced throughout what is called unofficial Kurdistan, an area that roughly includes parts of Turkey, Iran, Syria, and Iraq. Most live in Turkey, and in Iraq, they have a semi-autonomous government. Now, with instability raging across Syria and Iraq, the possibility of a Kurdish state, at least in Iraq, is closer than ever.
Subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook.